Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
Please join me for a minute's silence to remember those who have been killed this year.
For years, they've kept the Palestinians in captivity, and now they're taking revenge for a bad action, but the revenge is totally out of proportion to the crime that was committed. So we're asking for a ceasefire so that the Palestinians can live. It's not right that the Israelis could keep water and fuel and food away from them. So we're just adding our voices to those of other people and just asking for an end to war and an end to an arms trade, and we want justice and peace for all people.
I came to demand that our government asks for an immediate ceasefire and an end to the genocide of the Palestinian people.
Did you travel far to get here?
Carlisle.
Right now, Gaza is an extermination camp. This is not a war. It's an ethnic cleansing.
People are coming out. They can no longer control media. Social media is playing a huge role in, in people spreading the truth. Because as we know, BBC, CNN, Sky News, they're good at twisting things. And I think it's important that we all come out and use our social media platforms.
Why they're not condemning it. I just don't understand. I'm just shocked. I mean, obviously they're condemning Hamas, which we all condemn, because it's, as a Muslim, we condemn the lives of any innocent human being, whether it's Muslim or non-Muslim. But they're not saying what Israel is doing is incorrect.
Been way before
exactly.
Hamas came into existence. So,
exactly. So
Hamas is not the issue at the moment. It's kids that are being killed. So I think
it's amazing to see people from all around England, all over England, to show solidarity here in London, in the capital, outside the Houses of Parliament. This is where political processes happen, and this is where we need to be standing. So it's amazing having people back in their local communities next week, but bringing everyone together here in London, I think, is the greatest way to show the solidarity, and hopefully we can get a crowd bigger and bigger and growing every week.
Real support for Jewish people is to acknowledge we have multiple opinions, and many of us are here today to say we do not support the genocide happening in Israel. There's overwhelming statistical evidence that Israeli bombardments on the Palestinian people make Jews in the UK and the US less safe, because when Israel has a peak in its military operations, there is a one-to-one correlation with increase in experiences of anti-Jewish hate crime in the US and the UK. This is statistical fact. So the best way to make Jews in the UK and the US more safe is for Israel to stop bombarding Gaza and stop its genocidal military apartheid regime against the Palestinian people. We need one democratic state for all, a peaceful democracy where everyone can live together side by side and actually have a democratic right. There are millions of Palestinians, both citizens of Israel in J1, J2, J3 districts of Jerusalem, who do not have access to their full rights as citizens of a democratic state. Never mind, that does not even include the Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza under military colonial siege. In order for there to be a just peace, we need one true, just, democratic state for all the residents of Greater Palestine.
Yeah, we're here today to show our solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters who's been under occupation for so long and currently under bombing by the Israeli occupiers. We are Indonesian people here, live in the UK, we live in London. We travel here together to show our support.
I've got a message to the Zionists: stop occupying, stop killing. If you really want to have a war with Hamas, you've got to kill the men and soldiers, not the poor little babies and the ladies and innocent civilians cutting water and food. Be men about it and fight them like men. Yeah, right now you're cowering over these bombs that you're dropping on hospitals, on people's houses. It's wrong. Fight them like men. You're not men.
There's no nice way of putting this, but Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak, You guys are absolutely disgusting. You lack humanity in your heart when you're seeing millions and hundreds and thousands of Palestinians being slaughtered and killed brutally, and it hasn't been happening since the 7th of October. It's been happening for 75 years that you guys have let this run, and the British Parliament have actually, they've actually helped it to actually come to play. I have no words for the British Parliament at all right now, because they're doing for what benefits them, and we're all here today to show them, well, no, we don't stand with what the Parliament is saying, and we don't stand with Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak.
I think the solution to this is that there should be it shouldn't be two states. Israel should just be one country. And if you look at what's happening, most of the younger people are really into all living together. And it's just the people at the top who have got the power and the money that want this division.
Thank you. Do you know what's happening in the Gaza Strip? The Gaza Strip is living in a continuous state of violence, a complete siege and cutting of electricity, internet and water, and the targeting of safe houses. Whole neighborhoods have been destroyed. Unfortunately, there's only rubble and casualties. In Gaza, there is no place safe. Schools, mosques, churches and hospitals are not safe. This is the fiercest and most violent war in Gaza. Where are the human rights? Where are the international laws? And where are the countries in the world to see what's happening to us? Help us to stay alive. These are not my words. These are not my words. These are the words of Sham and Mahmoud, the children of the Al Jazeera reporter Wa'il Dahdouh. Sham and Mahmoud were Palestinian children just like me. They had hopes and dreams, hobbies and friends just like me. The world failed Mahmoud and Sham. In Gaza, nearly 3,000 children have been killed. And there are 800 estimated to be still stuck under rubble. How many more children have to die before the world opens its eyes? I wish Sham and Mahmoud could talk to you instead of me, but they were killed, and it could have been me.
Israel has succeeded to cut communications in Gaza. You know why? You know why? You know why? Because they want to commit their crimes in the darkness. In the darkness. But guess what, my friends, my brothers and sisters? They have failed. They have failed to defeat our spirit. They have failed to defeat our spirit. The spirit of the great people of Palestine in Gaza, in Jerusalem, in Nablus, in Ramallah, in Hebron, in refugee camps all over the world. Our diaspora, our exiled community, our spirit is as high as ever. And they have failed to defeat you, to silence you, to intimidate you. Yesterday, 120 countries at the UN voted for a ceasefire. Will Israel listen? No. 14 countries in the world voted against. We shall remember them. We shall remember them. Imagine voting against protecting civilian life. Imagine voting against international law. What has happened to our humanity? What has happened to our values? What has happened to an international system that promised equal rules for all?
Let me say to those in power, we will never stop reminding you of your support for genocide. We will make make sure history remembers you as criminals. We will work to bring you to the war crimes and criminal courts. Let us say to the children of Gaza and Palestine, we are here to give you hope. Friends, we can only give hope if we commit to actions. Friends, there is not a minute to waste. Mobilize your friends, mobilize your family, mobilize your colleagues, mobilize your neighbors to help end this massacre in Gaza. Let us work to bring a meaning to the words never again. Never again means demanding your MP calls for an immediate ceasefire. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Never again means demanding BBC stops the dehumanizing of the Palestinians. Never again means we fly the Palestinian flags from every home, every car, and every business in Britain today. Let's go back to our homes and make sure we fly the flag of Palestine until Palestine is free. Never again means we boycott everything that comes from Israel. Never again means speaking up for justice for Palestinians. But above all, never means standing up for Palestine. It doesn't matter what it costs.
Of course, like any sovereign country, Israel would have a right to defend itself. But what is really happening? Israelis are bombing sites which should be protected, like hospitals. So doctors are operating on the floor. They are having to amputate limbs without anaesthetic. Babies are being disconnected from their incubators. Is that self-defense? Israeli bombers have killed 3,000 Palestinian children in the past 3 weeks. Is that self-defense? Overall, more than 7,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed in the past 3 weeks. Is that self-defense? And earlier this week, Gazans were told to move south because they'd be safer. But the south is still being bombed. And now the Israelis are saying that anybody left in the north will be deemed a terrorist accomplice. Is that self-defense? Or is it an excuse for the unimaginable Palestinian casualties there will be when this is all over? So our leaders do not speak for the vast majority of the people in this country. They do not speak in our name. We demand a ceasefire on all sides. We demand an end to the bombing, and we demand an end to the slaughter. That is the will of the British people. And we come together as Muslims, Jews, Christians, people of all faiths and none. We are united, we are determined, we wish nobody ill, but we demand peace and justice. We uphold international law, we oppose all war crimes, and we will not give up until we achieve peace. They will slander us, they will block us, they will try and marginalise us, but we must not lose sight of our aim, peace and justice.
We will support those voices on both sides who have shown tremendous courage in promoting peace and dialogue and a just settlement with a democratic solution. RNT opposes anti-Semitism and Islamophobia that is exacerbated by war and continuing occupation. violence and extreme rhetoric only makes matters worse. And finally, we call on the Labour Party leadership and our whole movement to support peace, not war. Starmer must call now for an immediate ceasefire and mass emergency aid for the people of Gaza. The Labour Party and our whole workers' movement must show it is on the side of the peacemakers, not the warmongers.
Our message today to the Israeli government is clear and simple. Stop. Stop the bombing of Gaza. Stop the blockade of Gaza. Stop the occupation, the illegal settlements, and stop the apartheid. And let us not be deterred or intimidated in our message of ceasefire. We in Ireland know about the difficult path to peace, but whilst difficult, it is possible with support and political will. Make no mistake that over the past weeks, the millions of people like us all here today taking to the streets and demanding an end of the cruel suffering of the Palestinian people is a voice that cannot be ignored, is a voice that will not be ignored. Israel will attack those of us here today. They attacked the United Nations Secretary General during the week, or any government that dares talk peace or human rights or aid agencies on the ground in Palestine, but they are wrong. We know we are right as we stand on the right side of history and we stand on the right side of humanity.
And who are we? Who are we? And what do we stand for? Whilst we are increasingly being maligned by those seeking to justify the unjustifiable, the answer is very clear. We are the people of all around the world, from all faiths, from all ethnicities, from all backgrounds. We are calling for peace and we are calling for justice where there are war crimes and crimes against humanity.
And we repeat the call that has been made today for an immediate ceasefire, ceasefire now. And I say this, those who do not join that call will be condemned forever by history, and we will not forget them. My union is an affiliate of the Labour Party, and I say this to David Lammy and Keir Starmer, it's not that difficult, you just say it, ceasefire now.
The UN General Secretary backs a ceasefire. More and more governments back a ceasefire. Oxfam and Amnesty back a ceasefire. It's shameful, shameful that our government refuses to support one, especially when 2/3 of the public want one. A ceasefire would save thousands of civilian lives, would help with ensuring the safe release of the Israeli hostages, would allow in the scale of aid needed in Gaza to address the nightmare that people are living through and dying in there.
For them, more than 7,000 dead Palestinians isn't enough to call for a ceasefire. For them, 2,500 dead Palestinian children isn't enough to call for a ceasefire. It is not enough for kids to be writing their names on the palm of their hands because they want people to know who they are when they die. It's not enough for premature babies in incubators to be at risk because hospitals are running out of fuel. It's not enough for whole neighborhoods to be flattened and countless bodies to be lost in the rubble in mass graves. It's not enough because to this government, Palestinian lives matter so little that these blatant war crimes, and they are blatant war crimes, aren't enough for them to demand a ceasefire. So let me say this and let me be clear. Shame on every single person who has given a green light to this assault. Shame on every single one of them.
Britain has played a role in creating this cycle of killing and bloodshed in the Middle East. Our country, the former colonial power, is jointly responsible for the Skies-Picot Agreement, the disaster of the Balfour Declaration, the betrayals of the McMahon and the invasion by the forces led by Allenby. Our country is responsible for the gross abuses of the Mandate and the disaster of the Nakba. We have a responsibility to work towards peace. We should stop encouraging war. Short term, We need an immediate ceasefire, humanitarian access to food, water, energy and medicines for Gaza, and securing the unconditional and safe return of all hostages. Our long-term priorities must be ensuring the fundamental human rights on all sides are upheld. Now, this did not start a few weeks ago with Hamas's unconscionable attack. For my whole life, there has been killing and bloodshed, and unless we want to go round in circles, we have to talk about peace. That word that has been missing in the face of bitterness and recrimination, and I think the most important contribution we can make is to call for peace.
I've been a councillor in Oxford for 5 years, a city twinned with Ramallah since 2019. 6 of us resigned from Labour last Friday. The party that talks of equality yet fails to see the Palestinians as humans. The Labour Party is led by a human rights lawyer who struggles to define indiscriminate bombing of homes, of ambulances, and a 2,000-year-old church as a war crime. The media pundits would have us believe this inhumanity started on October 7th. Tell that to Khaled Abu Sada. Tell that to Arif Abdulrahim. These paramedics were killed by Israeli tanks, packed with dart-like nails as they moved wounded civilians into their ambulance in the 2009 bombing of Gaza. Tell that to Razan al-Najjar, a volunteer paramedic, an utterly defiant 21-year-old who was shot dead by the Israeli occupation forces as she tended to the wounded on the Great March of Return in 2019. The siege of Gaza, suffocating its citizens of the basics of life, of freedom of movement and healthcare, the occupation of the West Bank, with children terrified of going to school in case they're arrested by the IOF, the apartheid regime with roads that Palestinians cannot walk in their own land did not start on October the 7th. We are all here to demand a ceasefire and an end to siege, occupation and apartheid. The supremacy of one people over another must end. Last night, Palestinian communication systems were destroyed. This is intentional sadism, inflicting not just death and destruction, but the deep psychological torture of isolation. For families, staying connected was everything. Imagine not being able to find out if your family members are alive, dead, or under the rubble. Imagine not even being able to call an ambulance. So we are here, standing in solidarity, to tell the Palestinian people that we will stand with them through this darkness, through this world-sanctioned genocide in the darkness.
Please make some noise for Jeremy Corbyn, who is going to start us off with a very special message from Mustafa Barghouti. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, every single person that's here today. Thank you, everyone that's come here today to bear witness of our support for the Palestinian people and our horror of what has gone on overnight. I just had a phone call and a message a moment ago from Dr. Mustafa Barghouti in Palestine. He's spoken many times at our rallies and often travelled to Britain to campaign for the Palestinian people. He sent me a message. I'll read part of it, but it's quite long. Dear friends and comrades, we thank you for your solidarity and for supporting the truth and justice. We need you to stand up to your government and to the USA government and tell them enough is enough. How many more thousands of Palestinians and children should die before you support an immediate ceasefire? Every minute that passes without a ceasefire means the death of a child or a woman or a man, destruction of a house, and a death of a Palestinian child in an incubator without electricity. We will never give up our struggle for freedom and dignity and for free Palestine. With your solidarity, we will overcome. And the day will come when you will tell your grandchildren that you were part of the noble struggle for a free Palestine. And that's from the wonderful Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who is at the moment, I think, in Ramallah or in Gaza. I'm not absolutely sure. Last night, Gaza was plunged into darkness. Last night, Gaza was plunged into isolation as the internet connections and everything else were closed down. You might think about our relying on people who we don't know and have no control over, denying us all the methods of communication. There's some important lessons here. People in darkness last night, in rubble, in destroyed buildings, waiting and waiting for a bomb to fall. The last moments of life that children will have experienced will have been hunger, thirst, fear, and finally a bomb through their home, and that's the end of their life. 8,000 people have died in Gaza. What happened in the Negev was wrong. What's happening now is totally wrong under any circumstances whatsoever. There's nothing about humanity or humanitarianism in what is going on at the moment in Gaza, and also in the West Bank, and also the fear that so many Palestinians living in refugee camps have as well. What we're witnessing is the destruction of life, of culture, of art, the artist that will never paint again, the teacher that will never paint again, the baker that will never bake again, the taxi driver that will never drive again. All people being bombed by 21st century weapons into a nation under siege, in poverty, in reliance on the UN for all the basics of life. This is abominable beyond belief. We're here today in Parliament Square, as are thousands of people all around the world, sadly bearing witness to this on television. The world's nations voted at the UN last night in the General Assembly of the United Nations by an overwhelming majority to demand a ceasefire. It's not much to ask, a ceasefire, when children are being killed by weapons coming through the roofs of their homes. And to their eternal shame, and it is an eternal shame, the British government abstained on that vote. The United States voted against, and James Cleverly on television this morning claimed that our duty was to stand in solidarity with Israel's defense. I ask myself, what is offensive about bombing a school or telling a hospital team leave the building because we're going to bomb it when it's already overfull with desperate people? We're witnessing the destruction of life. We're witnessing the end game of the arms industry that supplies all these weapons that kill all these people. We're seeing the end game of political convenience and triangulation that cares more about what this person thinks to that person, to this industry, to that industry, to that interest group, to the other interest group. What about the people that are dying? What about the lack of human rights? What about the occupation of the West Bank? What about the refugees that are all around the world? And so we say no no, no to the ethnic cleansing of the people of Gaza, which is going on at the moment. And never forget that 90% of the population of Gaza are themselves, either individually or by descent, have come there from the Nakba in 1948. Are they now going to be driven out of Gaza to form a new Gaza in the Sinai, and then the whole thing will kick off again? Or are we going to witness a ceasefire and a process that brings about peace and recognition and an end to the occupation? I have visited all parts of the region many, many times, and I've met wonderful people there, and I've been in touch with them by the phone and so on over the last few days. Their stories are heartbreaking. The artwork that people are sending me over the phone is devastating. When you see all their painting and all their drawing is just about the destruction they're witnessing. It's their form of therapy to try and get through. One place I loved visiting in Gaza was a place called the Beach Primary School. It's right up the top end of the Gaza Strip, the north end of the Gaza Strip. You go onto the roof of the school and you can see the fence around Gaza. You can see the lights of Ashkelon to the north, and you can see Israeli soldiers just over the border in Israel. And this school is beautifully run by a very, very dedicated, wonderful group of teachers and supporters through the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Beautifully kept, beautifully run, and the children full of enthusiasm and hope and singing and dancing and sport and literature and poetry and art and everything else, enthusiastically showing me their paintings and reciting in Arabic, translated for me, the poems they'd written. I fear that school is now once more a pile of rubble, like so much of the rest of Gaza is. That is what they're doing. They're destroying life itself in Gaza. Like all of you, I feel very angry and I feel very frustrated. I want to live in a world that's free from racism of all sorts. Islamophobia, anti-black racism, anti-Semitism, any form of racism is unacceptable in any way. And I want to live in a world of peace. I want to live in a world where we respect each other, where we don't think security is the ability to kill our neighbour, where we think security is the ability to support our neighbour, to feed our neighbour, to help our neighbour, to respect our neighbour. That is what we want. And so it's that sense of powerlessness that's brought us all here today. But voices here, voices in every city in this country, voices all over Europe, voices in the USA, voices in South Africa, voices all over Asia are speaking out. People who've never ever been on a march or a demonstration before are so appalled at what they're seeing. They're coming out to call for a ceasefire, call for peace, call for an end to the occupation and justice for the people of Palestine. Quite simply, we want peace. What do we want? Peace now! What do we want? Peace now! My friends, thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll be here next week. We'll be out every day. We'll be out on the streets as long as it takes to bring peace and justice for the Palestinian people. Thank you.
Ceasefire!